To have this conversation with the department that it was no longer needed makes your department look foolish, and it certainly am not going to make me look foolish in the future. Shall the Justice Secretary?
So, Mr. Speaker, we're back here again then. At least the Justice Secretary gets some use out of his new suit. But where has Wednesday's bombast and bravado gone? Get a grip, man, he thundered last week, without even a hint of irony. None of that today, was there? And why is that? Well, it's because, like increasing numbers of criminals in our jails, the Justice Secretary just doesn't know whether he's coming or going. Even his colleagues in government are now turning on him, some with unbridled contempt. The handling is terrible, was the verdict of a cabinet minister. Just rank incompetence. Cowardly. Frankly, pretty dodgy, was the verdict of another. Before long, the Prime Minister will be saying he has full confidence in him. And we all know what that means. Look, 2 weeks ago, he came to the House and he said he had put in place the strongest checks ever to stop releases in error. 48 hours later, another prisoner with a history of sex offences was released in error. 7 days later, and a fraudster is let out the very day he was sentenced to 45 months inside. And today, he admits that he's lost another prisoner that same day. They're Lammy's lags, a whole new category of criminal who can just waltz out of prison despite having the strongest ever checks introduced by this Justice Secretary. The public are being endangered as this circus rumbles on, week after week, with no end in sight. When will he put a stop to it? He can't just hide behind the inquiry that he's commissioned. He couldn't even get the head of the review, Lynn Owens, name right last week. Anne Owens. Anne Owens, he bellowed. Well, I looked her up, and the only Anne Owens I could find was a panto performer who recently appeared in Alice in Wonderland. Perhaps she was the one who gave him some tips on his performance at the dispatch box last week. The former Chief Inspector of Prisons says that this has been caused, at least in part, by the confusion created by Labour's botched early release scheme. Does he now concede that there is a link between the doubling of prisoners accidentally released in the last year and the introduction of their SDS 40? Or is it just an extremely unlucky coincidence? Don't take us for fools. And Mr. Speaker, when will he finally come clean? He won't provide details in parliamentary questions. He won't answer even when he is here for Prime Minister's questions. He won't respond to letters. Well, perhaps that's because they weren't addressed to the Deputy Prime Minister. He's now been dragged here, kicking and screaming, to admit that one prisoner has been on the run from this Labour government for 14 months, and 91 have been accidentally released over the last 7 months. But the Justice Secretary is so clueless, he's literally lost track of how many prisoners he's lost. He says today a prisoner may have been accidentally released last Monday. Well, has he looked? He's either in his cell or he's not. What a complete and utter farce he's presiding over. As we all suspected, the crisis on his government's watch is even bigger than he dared admit. That's why he wouldn't say anything last week. Prisoners are being accidentally released nearly every other day and putting our constituents, his constituents, at risk. At this rate, he's on track for 156 prisoners to be accidentally released this year, which would be a record were it not for the doubling his government managed to achieve last year under their watch. And in his statement today, he poses more questions than he manages to answer. How many crimes were committed by those prisoners whilst they were on the run? Why can't he tell us who these 91 prisoners are? Who is the foreign criminal? And who is this mystery fourth offender he may have lost? How can he possibly be found if the public don't have his face? They don't have his name, like they did for Sharif and Kabatu. The public deserve to know the truth. And this situation could not be any more serious. There's been a 9-fold increase in the number of violent offenders accidentally released in the last year. A 9-fold increase. The criminal justice system, under his watch, has been made to look a total mockery. The public are being put at risk. In his own words, Mr. Speaker, it's time for him to get a grip or go.
Justice Secretary.